Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Everyday Entrepreneur. Here, I'm your host, Paul Howard Flowers Jr., and this is the Potpourri Place Podcast show. Today, I've got the distinguished honor to bring on a guest that many of you might actually know. This gentleman has traveled the country with an extensive career in coaching and basically human development. Now, we're not just talking about any individuals that he may coach. We're talking about elite level athletes. So really looking forward to this exciting conversation. Mr. Dean Cooper, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Good, Paul. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the introduction. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's always a pleasure to have guests from varied backgrounds. So we're just going to hop right in. Let us know right now, Dean, where are you? What are you working on? And let's go into a little bit of history lane and how you got to this point today.
Yeah. Well, currently I'm actually sitting in Nashville, Tennessee. You can probably see I've got a bunch of music stuff here in the background. And so that's where I physically am. Where I am in my journey is the last couple of years after 22 years in the NBA, and I'll hop back to that in a second since you asked, and I'll try to give you the funnel version of it. But the last couple of years, I've been consulting with teams and doing just individual workouts with younger kids, high school, late middle school age kids, and then besides that, I while I was doing this consulting thing, I wanted to come up with a product or something where I could do a workshop, a seminar where I just go in for a day, 4 or 5 hours, and talk to people about how to build healthy culture, how to sustain it, what does it look like, healthy feedback loops. That was born out of I'm a huge reader and I'm a huge listener. I walk about 6 to 8 miles a day and I listen to books and podcasts. As much as I love music, I don't listen to music. And I don't listen to sports podcasts.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I try to do things that are growth mindset oriented.
Mm.
So for about 6 or 7 years, I've really been on behavioral economics and emotional intelligence because I think coaches really need it. And it's those two subjects in particular are, paramount to healthy culture and good leadership.
Mm.
I wrote this book, Fail, which we can touch on during the course, and it's actually on how to succeed. It's kind of a Saturday Night Live skit, so a
Okay.
lot of sarcasm and satirical take on how to ultimately succeed. So that's where I'm at now. Uh, where I How it all started, you mentioned before we came on that you're in Gary, Indiana. I grew up not far from there in Western Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids.
Okay.
So really close to where you're at. Um, Obviously, I know Isaiah Thomas and some of the people from your area that have the Jacksons. So,
Good.
but had a pretty interesting career. I started out coaching college basketball or high school basketball, and then got my first college job, an NAI job in Grand Rapids, where I went to school actually at Aquinas, and then transitioned to my first Division I job at the University of Buffalo. And then I was fortunate enough to make, with no intention actually, it's funny how God just looks out or carves this path for you. Um, and I got in the NBA in '99 with the Rockets as a video coordinator slash scout. And I made my way to the bench as an assistant, and I spent 4 or 5 more years there on the personnel side. Eventually became the assistant GM in Houston. So my first stint in Houston was about 9 years.
Okay.
And then I went back to the coaching side in Minnesota and Portland and went back to the Rockets as an assistant with Kevin McHale, and then to Utah and Chicago. Utah for 4 years, and Chicago for a couple, and then spent a couple years back in college before where I ended up in this journey that I'm at now. So that's the journey in a nutshell.
Excellent, excellent. So definitely very well traveled as it comes to moving in and about. Now, question: as far as moving from team to team, did that mean that you relocated to from area to area?
I did until I got to the Rockets in '99. When I got to Houston, and like I mentioned, my first time there, I was there for 9 years,
Right.
and I loved Houston, and I just kind of decided, and there's some real benefits of living in Texas, no state income tax, warm weather, those types of things that, well, in our business, you just have to have a permanent home no matter, you don't have to, but it's what I chose to do.
Right.
And
Right.
so when I went to Minnesota and Portland prior to coming back, I still owned my property in Houston.
Okay.
Um, when I went back, I just had somewhere to live. And then after the second time around, um, my wife and I had versatility because she had her own business. We don't have children. And I love music. I play the guitar. I got a lot. Well, now I play the piano since COVID. Um, and I just want to be around the things that I like to do besides play golf, like play the guitar, play my piano now, and want to be around somebody. So we moved our permanent house to Nashville, and we've been It'll be 10 years in August, and we ain't moving. This.
So how did that work then with, last 10 years having a physical and a primary home in Tennessee, but then you'd also worked with Salt Lake City, Utah, you worked with the Bulls.
Yeah.
How did that work as far as travel?
So
You just on the road a lot or what?
yeah, I just would get most of the time what I try to do is look for like a furnished condo where
Okay.
I don't have, the only thing I got to do is just send my clothes,
Mhm.
right? And so that's usually what I do. Actually, in Utah, I got a, instead of getting a furnished place, I just got a place and then rented from Court Furniture. And so the 2 days before I had to leave, I said, just come get your stuff. Real easy. Boom, boom, send my clothes home and we're good to go.
Perfect, perfect. Well, nothing like being a man that's able to move when need be. But let's talk about some of that transition, and we're gonna bounce around a little bit, but just kind of following that piece of leaving one place and going to another, and now really kind of calling Tennessee home. What's the goal now, right? We've kind of left NBA a little bit to the, I won't say back burner or wayside, but what's Dean up to now? What's the thing that wakes you up in the morning? What gets you thrilled at night? What are your days like?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm always going to be the way I've even looked at my coaching career. Um, I always explain it like this, like I think, and this is where I think coaches make a mistake. I think coaches want to coach all the time.
Mhm.
And I think in my mind, there's a clear difference. Like, I think you coach during the games, that's a tactical thing
Right,
and a
right.
decision-making thing. And I think the rest of it, the practice and all the other things, those are teaching times. And
Mhm.
so I've always looked at it as 85% of my time has been as a teacher, not as a coach.
Okay.
And that's sort of how I got to this journey is I just was brought up in a family. I come from a family of 11 police officers that are there to protect and serve.
Excellent.
And my dad taught me to give back, um, as people gave to me, number one. And I'm very curious person. Like, so that's why I read and listen a lot. Um, which gets me down these different paths. I just happen to be stuck on this one, or not stuck, because I still do a breadth of reading. I read all types of stuff, but I've dug deep. I've went down depth on these behavioral economics, leadership, emotional intelligence thing. So yeah, now, and I may coach again. I probably will coach again or go back to the MBA on the personnel side. But the helping coaches be the best version of themselves, no different than tried to help players be the best version of themselves when they were with us, is that's kind of my focus now, and trying to help people in that regard. Both from whether it's personal experience, uh, positive, negative, mistakes I've made, mistakes I've avoided, um, to observation, write down the list.
Now, tell me, how did that then give birth to space for curiosity? That I was really curious, well, pun intended, right? I was really curious to know
Yeah.
about space for curiosity.
Well, when I mentioned that, so what I have consulting I do with teams, and most of that's tactical, right? It's X and O driven.
Right.
Some of it, so there's a little bit of kind of behavioral economics, culture building, but that's not what it is. But so I want to have a product or a service, however you want to put it, where do something where it's looks like what John Gordon does, who wrote the Energy Bus, or Stephen Covey does, or John Maxwell, people like that, where So I got the product all done, and I'm out on my walk one day. This is honest to God how it happened. I'm out walking and I'm getting ready to send this out to like athletic departments. Because even though it's transitional across genres and types of businesses, obviously I thought the smartest thing to do is swim in the pond that I'm used to swimming in, which is
There we go.
athletics, right? And it's where I'll have my most initial credibility. So
Right.
I'm out walking and I have it all done. And I asked myself this question. I said, aside from my resume, which is unique, what's going to separate me from anybody else trying to
Mm.
get in this space? And it dawned on me, everybody goes in and tries to tell people how to succeed.
Right.
So it's like listening to Charlie Brown's teacher, you know?
Wah, 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 wah.
So and I kind of have a sarcastic, satirical sense of humor anyways.
Mhm.
So I said, I'm just going to tell people how to fail. Like I'm going to come at success from I'm going to torpedo them from a completely different um, angle,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna ask them to acknowledge, recognize, address dysfunctional and toxic behaviors that are holding their team, their organization, or even themselves back. So I was sitting here playing my guitar, and about 3 years ago, my lawyer sent me this A to Z book. It's called M is for Metal. And it's basically a children's book for adults. So
Okay.
every letter has like a thing, every letter of the alphabet. I put my guitar down, I picked up my computer, and I went through all of the late A through Z, the letter of the alphabet, dysfunctional behaviors, and then I started just compiling a list of words that I know from all of this studying and observation, these life things I've lived.
Hmm.
And
Here
lo
we
and
go.
behold, 4 days later, I had a book.
Huh. Talk about putting the pedal to the proverbial metal, right? M is for metal, and getting something done. The discipline that it takes to do that for many is, again, non-existent. And I'd been in that category until recently. So just a little bit of a preview here. And I'm not going to talk about my own wares, but we have a segment that is going to be launched in June, mid to late June, called Author's Alley. So after I get a copy, because I do want to go ahead and order a copy of the book, I presume it's available on Amazon, and read it. I want to bring you back on the show if you're open to that. I know it's an early plug, but I want to bring you back on to really dive deep into the pages of the books where I can ask some intelligent questions and really give our listeners a good feel for what it's about to fail and why they should pick up a copy.
Yeah. I would love to come back on and do it. And the great thing about my book I'll give a little just plug to the book now. We can talk about some of this stuff in there if you choose, or whatever way we're going to go, or come back to that at a later time, as you mentioned. But I think the two good things about it is you can see, I mean, it takes 20 minutes to read it.
Hmm.
Now it takes a long time to digest it
That
and
part.
to walk yourself through it and acknowledge some of these behaviors. Like A is avoid difficult conversations, avoid holding people accountable.
Hmm.
C is complacency. Once you have a little success, just get complacent and think, oh yeah, the cheetahs are never going to catch up to me. I have too much
Ah,
of a head start. Well,
right.
like, let's see how that works out for you, you know? So yeah, I mean,
Okay.
um,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
we're
I'd love
definitely
to do
gonna
that.
come back on and dive into that, and you've got such a varied history. Excuse me, I can imagine how those life experiences really added to you being able to put that together so quickly, but B, make that book something that people can really stand behind, understand, and believe in. Like you said, it may take 20 minutes to read, but even days, weeks, months, hell, for some a lifetime to digest. You know, I'd imagine that throughout that process, let's just call it the creative process, that you might have had moments where you wanted to stop or do something else. And I wanted to bring that up to talk about the discipline, both that you have within yourself and obviously that you've seen with the players on the court. How much does discipline have a role in your day-to-day life now? And how much has it had over the years as you've become again a successful now entrepreneur outside of the NBA?
That's a great question. I always start with this is I think discipline, um, first of all, it needs to come to maximize or optimize discipline. It has to come from within. You can get external discipline that we all, well, we didn't all, but
Yeah, I did.
unfortunately, for some of those unfortunately, maybe some people who didn't. I mentioned I grew up in a family of 11 police officers. Like there was a lot of discipline, health, and let me use this word, healthy
Healthy. Yep.
discipline. And it really was, and here's a word I would substitute for discipline is I'm less inclined to call it self-discipline than I am self-accountability. Like
Mm,
that's really all discipline is just can you hold yourself accountable um, to something? And or my parents held and then eventually it has to leak over into because at some point the bird has to flee the nest,
right.
you
Right.
know, and um, use this all the time, and I'm going to use the G version. I'm not a big rules person. I haven't been
Okay.
for a long time. Like the rules are something you abide by. You stop at the stop sign because that's the rule.
Okay. Yeah.
You wear your seatbelt because that's the rule. You do certain things and go like rules are just simply guardrails that you have to stay in. So uh, I would tell, well, like when I was a G League head coach or in the NBA, you usually get about like 3 to 4 guys um, uh, that you have for the whole year that
Mm.
you work with so that you can lean into them, create trust, their story, all those things. And I would tell whether it was my G League head team or the group of guys, the very first thing I'd say, guys, I don't believe in rules. I
Mm.
got two rules. And I'm going to give you the G version of the second one. The first one doesn't need the G version, is be on time.
Absolutely.
The second one is don't act like a jerk or whatever words you want to insert for jerk.
Understood.
Okay. That's it. That's literally now rule number two is pretty encompassing, right? So I have an acronym that I prefer, and I'll tell you the why is it's C for yourself, S.E. Dot A. Standards, expectations, and accountability. Standards are something you can achieve. Those are things you can achieve. Expectations are something which the standards help you get to there. And then the accountability part comes in is when you don't do those things, whether it's self accountability or external accountability, someone has to hold you to that.
Mm,
Rules are you do them because you're told to, and this is just what you have to do, or there's consequences.
right.
Standards are something that's something I'm trying to live up to.
Mm.
And
Okay. Okay. Well, that's definitely a good way to frame it, so to speak. Standards, expectations, and accountability. Now, you'd worked in an industry with primarily men, I'll say, and with that, I noticed your second rule was "don't be a jerk." I can only imagine what the additional ratings of that could again
it's not,
translate
it
to.
probably just PG-13, but
Perfectly fine, perfectly fine. So, with that, what immediately comes to mind is this idea of masculinity, that everything has to be a macho kind of way. And again, with 20 years experience in that space, if you could share with us stories of how masculinity exists in that area, in that culture of the NBA and professional sports, and quite frankly, if there are any myths about it that on the outside we believe are true, but from what you see on the inside just aren't.
oh boy, how this show's only an hour.
By all
So,
means, we can run a little later if need be.
yeah, yeah. So the first thing is actually the other thing about, see, rules are something that I don't have a say in.
Okay.
I have no say in that, right? We're just, the stop sign is there because the city engineer and the police just figured that needed to be there.
Right.
I don't have any say in that. I have say, I have skin in the game on whether I'm going to live up to the standards expected of me. So when I would say this to players, first of all, they would chuckle. But the other thing is immediately it was, hey, there's a reciprocity here.
Mm,
Like there's skin in the game from both of us.
right.
And I have standards to come and make Paul the best version of you every day too. I used to tell my coaches, the players can have a bad day. We can't have a bad day.
Mm,
We can't do that. Like that's our standard. We can't allow ourselves to have a bad day. Now we're going to have some, obviously, but
right. We're all human.
if that's the goal, so I think immediately when I took that approach and took the approach also is like, this is a partnership. Rules are not partnerships. Rules are dictatorships. It necessarily sometimes, or authoritarian. Maybe that's the better word, right? And I get it. We have to have rules in certain things. But
Right.
I think when people feel that they're part of what's going on, this is something I learned from Rudy Tomjanovich. Rudy had a great saying. You know, he won two national NBA championships, and right before I got to the Rockets, and then won the gold medal with the Olympic team in 2001. I was with the Rockets, and he has a great saying: involvement equals commitment. If you get people involved in what you're doing, they're going to be committed. And so I think that's the first thing. And then I think that it starts to penetrate the second part of the question you asked me, which is the masculinity. I don't know if I would, and I probably should have asked you for clarity on masculinity. So forgive me if I'm making a leap here. I think what you're asking more about is ego and how do I, you know, become a man. But in reality, everybody at some, whether they acknowledge it or not, is we all want to be held accountable. We all want people to feel like we can. Accountability is people insert these two words as synonyms,
Mm,
and they're not even close. Is belittling or degrading. Accountability is just, are you going to, like, if Paul's having a bad day or not bringing it or whatever, I might just ask you, are we going to lower our standards for you today?
Mm.
Or because if we are, just let us know. So everybody knows where we're at. Player X, player Z, player A, player like just let everybody know. And or are you going to try to get to the culture? So I don't think I've never I shouldn't say this. We never bat 1,000 with players. And not
Absolutely.
everybody's personality is
Exactly.
compatible. However, I think players at the elite level, this is another part of the question you ask is what did you find? They're just people, man. No different than my musician buddies. They're just people. Now, sometimes the egos get out of control and does the money and the power contribute to that? Absolutely. There's no question about it. That's part of the thing. But I think for the most part, if you lean into them, my buddy who unfortunately passed away was the
Mm.
sports psychologist at Duke, and uh, um, unbelievable guy. And he would always say, everybody has a story. They got a story for their life. They got a story for the last year of their life, the last
True.
month, the last week, and even today. So you better, if you want the best out of them and to optimize your relationship, you better know their story because there's a point in time in our business or any leadership role, you better put some chips in your basket because you're going to have to spend some of them on some very difficult conversations.
Mm.
But if you don't have any chips in your basket to start with, good luck.
That's a very important point, and it ties right into that question on masculinity, where again, you'd mentioned that money and power, money kind of heightened that ego, excuse me, in so much that now you have people that might have come from very humble beginnings and now are amazingly famous, and they know that they might be able to sway their way because of their power, prominence, and position on the team. And at that same time, in terms of being a coach and helping them to still a play nicely, right? Because you're on a team, it's not a one person sport, and b elevate their game, bring them together when need be, when you need that fourth quarter hustle in order to get those last points or come from a deficit, right? It requires, like you said, to have some chips in your basket. Well, my question then is, how do you, I don't want to say expose like it's a problem, but how do you engage them in such a way that they become vulnerable enough to give you those chips in the first place?
Well, the first thing you have to do, it's real simple words. You got to be authentic. The second you try to start being somebody you're not, they sniff that out real quick,
Gotcha.
right? And I get this question a lot from college coaches in particular. Will say, "Well, what's it? Once guys get the MBA, or it maybe just sometimes on a podcast, or and how do you get them to adhere to want to be a part of the bigger group, right? Or how do you get them to listen to you?" And I say it's real simple. No, there's three things that professional athletes care about, and I think this is true across the board because I've got buddies that coach in Major League Baseball, I've got buddies that coach in the NFL. So, um, it's number one, you have to create trust with them. And I already touched on that. Like, how do you create trust? Trust. You have to lean into their story. You got to know what the things are that make them tick. You got to know what the things are that bring them down. You got to know how they think about their family. You got to know all those things. The only way to do that is to communicate. Like
Right.
you got to spend time. You got to lean in. Number two, they don't care if you're black, white, purple, green, polka dot, short, tall, fat, skinny, no hair, hair. They don't glasses, no, they don't care about any of that. What they care about is, are you competent?
Mm.
Are you competent? And third, so that when you tell me something, I know that it's going to be effective, or you can show me. And then third is, are you in it for them or for yourself? The second that they think that you're in it for your own glorification, you got no chance. Those are the three things they care about. And then you got to be authentic. Like, for me, like I said, I had this little travel guitar. It's called, or have it. It's called a pig nose, and it's got a little built-in amplifier. And I would just play it on the plane, in the locker room. So I'm playing it one day. I'll never forget this. And we're in Sacramento. And it's when I was with the Rockets the second time around. And I'm playing it in the locker room before the game, just playing some rock and roll. And one of our players, Donatus Mata-Eunice, he goes, Coop, why are you always playing your guitar? I said, so that when you and James Harden don't do what you're supposed to do defensively, when I tell you what you need to do and I get fired, I got something to fall back on. That's what. So yeah, sometimes there's like, you got to bring everything doesn't have to be a hammer.
Right.
It can be
Right.
humor. That my book it's not a hammer, it's humor, but very sensitive topics. But that's who I am. Like I didn't that happened organically. I didn't try to stage that.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who I am. If somebody else tried that, it probably wouldn't work.
And you mentioned the word authenticity. That's one of my favorite A words, right? Coupled with the other A word that you used a couple of times, which is accountability. And I think with that, you have the ability to increase a person's trust in you the more authentic you are and the more accountable you are to the things that you say you'll do either for yourself or for them. Because I'm certain that as a coach, with so many players under your helm, you've got a lot of eyes on you, right? The players have 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 people that are looking at them from a hierarchical standpoint, I'll just say. But in your case, all the players are looking at you. And it seems like that can develop a bit of pressure, if you will, to, because, and forgive me for saying it like this, again, no offense to any of the players under Dean's stead, but it's almost like raising children. And again, I know you said you didn't have children biologically, but in as much that you've been caring for the children of other people's parents for decades, you've had to touch on again, like you mentioned, very hard conversations, right? And to a degree, they look up to you and they look at you because you have a big portion of their future in your hands. How much playing time, what players are going to get me the points, the views, etc. So how did you, and how do you, I will say, because I'm sure there's still certain pressures with the current work, but how did you deal with that pressure of essentially being held accountable for the success of so many people over the years?
Great question. No one's ever asked me that question, actually. Not in that manner. Great question. So some of it is, like I said, the pressure, it doesn't go away, but it's mitigated if you are authentic. When you're not trying to fake, the people who have the most pressure on them are the people who lie or try to, because they can't remember what they said. And then they got to come up with the next thing and the next thing, and the next thing. So is to be authentic. And the second thing is this is another, like I reference Rudy Tomjanovich a lot. I mean, he's like my dad, my big brother, my uncle, my mentor, all of the above. I talk to him all the time. But this is something I learned when I got in the NBA. And I think this is a great lesson, is these 3 words are an acceptable answer. They can't be habitual. You can't say it every time. Mm-hmm. But these 3 words is an acceptable answer. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. But Paul, let me go check and let me ask Coach what he thinks and let me come back to you. Now, you can't say that every single time, But that is much better than telling somebody something that you're just winging it.
Mm, I like that. I like that. And it's funny you bring up that phrase, I don't know. And again, I'm not here to talk about myself. I'll just simply say that I'm very familiar with that phrase in a sales capacity, and the way that you use that phrase coupled with the and let me go and find out the answer. That's something that is, I'll call it sales 201, not even 101. It should be 101, but again, some people are just really rudimentary. So that has me to ask the question from that perspective, really what you've been doing. And again, I'll insert my past into this one, because it sounds like you have to sell the players on how they can perform, like the abilities that they have. Have you done any training in the sales realm, or has it basically been about human psychology and improvement in that space?
That's all that is sales. I tell people all the time, I can sell people on themselves. I can
Mm.
sell people on basketball. I can sell people how to play. I can't sell dishwashers. I can't sell cars. I can't sell computers. I can't, but I can sell people on themselves.
Okay, okay, that's good. That's good. Well, the dishwashers part, right?
Hey, I know my lane. I can play the guitar. I can't sing. Not one,
Interesting.
not a lick. I don't sing in the shower. I don't sing by my pool. Period.
Well, this has
Nothing.
actually been really fun. I'm curious, and not that it's something that I normally would do. Uh, and since you have so many guitars, uh, would you play a little medley for us?
Oh, but I could play a little mentally. I can play a little bit mentally. Like, I don't know.
I love it. And for our audible listeners, he's got a beautiful display in the background of several guitars as well as keyboards. So I urge you to come on and check out the YouTube version so that you can see Dean live in terms of utilizing his talents again right here live with us. So I'll turn it over to you if you could play a little medley for us.
I'll play a little bit. I got to get a picture. I'll play some. I'll play a familiar. I'll play a familiar song here. It's cross genres, like a Leonard Skinner, like Simple Man, you know. So you little Leonard Skinner. Everybody knows Leonard Skinner.
Admittedly, it might have been the way that the mic is set up. I was only able to get a piece of the medley. I was hearing bits and pieces of the chords, so we'll work with how that sounded. But I was getting the vibe from how you were
Gotcha.
performing it again right there. And again, I like to bring some other aspects into the show, so I thank you for indulging
Oh, it's good to
in that bit of
have a
curiosity also. Now, I will ask you again, as we're just in respect to your time, we're going to start landing the plane. I've got a couple of pointed questions that I do like to ask all the listeners, and assuming all of our guests for the listeners. Um, as we look at again who Dean Cooper has been and who Dean Cooper is, we typically call him by that very name, Dean Cooper. What I realize is that we usually, and you've seen this in the NBA, I'm sure, refer to people as their first and last name. Very seldom do you actually know the middle name of another person. It's typically 5 to 10 people, close friends, relatives, best friends, children, parents, that sort of thing. So I'm curious to know for our listeners, Dean, what's your middle name?
William.
William.
Yep.
Okay. Dean William Cooper. Now, does the William have a story? Is it handed down?
Yeah, that is handed down. My first name isn't. My middle name is after my maternal grandfather on my mom's side. So that's where my middle name comes from. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. And then the next couple of minutes here, I'd really just, oh,
Can I mention something? Because I think
please.
you'll love this. When you just said that. So when I go give speeches, and I got this from Doug Collins, um, who's always treated me great. And he says, like I've given some commencement speech and I go give athletic speeches. And he has a great thing. I'm not sure where he got it. I never asked him. I probably should have. Maybe he did it on his own.
Mhm.
Is we all have three names.
Hmm.
The name we're born with, Cooper. The name that we're given, Dean. The name that we make, Dean Cooper. Only the third one is the one that we have total control over.
Mm. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I may have to borrow that one
Yeah, borrow
for for a
that.
keynote in the upcoming times. I really like that. Okay. Okay, good stuff. And I appreciate you adding that to the space too. So all our listeners out there, again, by all means, borrow, give credit the first two times, third time it's yours.
Good point.
So for just a minute or two, Dean, if you would, uh, I'd ask, prior to the show for you to just consider some things that you would want to share with the audience. And admittedly, my goal with this specific episode is for the entrepreneur to be, or this segment, I should say, is for the entrepreneur to be the person that wants to start their own business or is growing in business, and that business can also be sports, right? To take a listen and learn from some of the experts in the field that have had years, in your case, decades of success. So, speaking to that audience, if you would, just pour into them for a minute or two on what you feel they should know.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with the word entrepreneur because I guess in some ways in the last couple of years I've been entrepreneurial, but in reality, I would tell everybody we're all entrepreneurs in and of our own individuality. Every single one of us is an entrepreneur of ourselves. We have to be, and we have to learn how to cultivate it. We have to learn how to grow it. We have to learn how to polish it. We have to learn how to sell it, and we have to learn how to reassess it. We should be in constant reassessment, and because it's just part of it's the world around us doesn't stay stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
The things in our own personal smaller world don't really very rarely stay stagnant. And I know you're going to ask me about this in a second, so maybe I'm going to kind of fast forward to
Okay.
it because it's such a big part of what I am is my website, which is where you can find my book, is actually called Space for Curiosity. Space, the word FOR, curiosity. And the reason that is I'm a very curious person, and I think it's really important for us to stay curious. I think it's really dangerous when we think that we have all the answers or know all the information. And I also think that part of being curious, which is really sad, I think, in our culture today, especially in a political climate that we live in,
Mm-hmm.
is that we immediately dig in to our own side and we don't listen to the other side. And I think what's important is that we listen. We might not agree,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. We can walk away from the table and not agree, but I think we would all be shocked if we just listen to the other side. And on some things, we're going to be able to acknowledge why a person thinks that way. It might not change our mind, but it will give us pause for thought. And a guy asked me on a podcast a week or two ago, like about my epitaph or whatever, and I said one of two things. I would like it to say perpetually curious, or I would like it to say still in progress, but pretty polished. I think
Okay.
it once we think that our progress is over, then the headstone might be coming real quick. And I think it's just really important. I tell young kids or older kids when I give speeches, man, stay curious and ask questions that, one of my favorite sayings is the answer to every question you don't ask is no.
Hmm.
So, ask questions, man. That's what makes little kids so like how many times you said you have a 12, a 2, and a 1. I'm
Yep.
sure with your 2 and your 1-year-old, you hear the word why about 1,000 times a day. Well,
Very specifically. Yep.
that's the beauty of curiosity is they just never give in, you
Mhm.
know? And I think it's really I believe in it. I think it's important. And I think it's not just curious. Like, I think society, we fall into, I don't think there's all kinds of evidence. In fact, I'm listening to this book right now called Willful Blindness. That's a
Okay.
legal term, but it's also a way of life. Like, but before they get it, she gets into that. She talks about how we end up organically migrating to people that look like us, talk like us, think like us, whatever. And it's like a river. It starts out as a stream, and then the water keeps flowing and flowing and flowing and flowing. And pretty soon you got a deep river with these banks on the side. Well, you have a real deep river, but you have no breadth of knowledge,
Mm,
like no breadth of what is going on. You can see, but it's all straight up and straight down.
right. Like a silo.
Yeah, like a silo,
Okay.
not a grain field.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Dean, this has been fantastic. And you did jump ahead a little bit. I'll ask also still, in addition to your website, is there any other way that listeners can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, you can email me on the website. Again, the website's called Space for Curiosity, SPACEFOR, curiosity.com. And you can email me at dean at sports spaceforcuriosity.com. You can, there's a, there's a you can spend 20 minutes on the website, similar to the book, and you can have a general, uh, knowledge of my journey, my background, why I've landed where I'm at, or I shouldn't say landed, why I'm flying through the space that I'm currently at. I don't
There
think
we
I've
go.
landed here. Is maybe I'm just touching down and refueling. I'm not sure. But you can find all that there. You can find out how to reach me for keynote speaking, seminars, things of that nature. It's the best place to buy the book because I'll send it to you directly versus Amazon.
Right.
And yeah, it's been great. And I hope people stop by. I do a weekly blog that gets updated every Thursday. It's called Nuggets and Reflections. It's mostly based around behavioral economics and emotional intelligence. And it's not meant to give answers. Usually I try to keep it to around 500 words. It's meant to be an appetizer, not the meal.
Beautiful. Well said. Spaceforcuriosity.com, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go there. And I'll be heading there. And hopefully when you send that direct copy, it's got a nice autograph in there for yours truly. So I was going to let you get out of here right now, but I've just got one more question that's kind of been burning here. And I think that the listeners might appreciate this. I was going to ask it in two ways, but I think I'll stray away from the negative way in terms of the players that you've worked with and ask who are the best three players that you've had the opportunity to coach?
Oh my goodness. Everybody asks this. And the first thing I'm going to say is I've been like for a kid from a town of 4,000 people in West Michigan with very humble upbringing, like to walk the journey that I've walked is like I've been beyond blessed. So I'm always hesitant to say that, talk about that because, there's different ways like greatness, but obviously I was fortunate enough. I got to coach Olajuwon. I mean, that dude, you know,
Oh yeah,
um, and then I got to coach Yao right after that. And then, with the Rockets, in my second time around, I had James Harden and we had Tracy McGrady and I've had LaMarcus Aldridge and Brandon Roy and Zach LaVine. And so, but I mean, yeah, I mean, Dream and Barkley was on that team too when I first got there.
okay.
Uh,
Oh,
so,
that was a
I've been fortunate. I've had so many good ones. It's hard to parcel them out, but number 34, Dream, he's a special cat.
love it, love it. We've all got our favorites. I come from an education background as well, and there are some students that just really stood out. above the rest. So I appreciate you sharing that. We'll give shout outs to those players as well. Well, Dean, this has been an absolute pleasure again. Thank you so much for joining us here in the Potpourri Place Podcast show. Listeners, this has been another segment of the Everyday Entrepreneur. I advise you all to please go and check out Dean Cooper's site, spaceforcuriosity.com. You'll see the information also in the show notes. And we are looking forward to reconnecting because I do want to, again, receive the book, read the book, and then bring you back for Author's Alley when we launch that segment here in just about a month or so. So thank you again, Dean. And to our listeners, thank you all for tuning in. You can be anywhere in the world and you're here with us. We appreciate you. We love you. Have a great rest of your day. And bye for now.